Dave Revsine joined today right off the bat by the Commissioner of the Big Ten, Kevin Warren. Thanks so much for dropping by and spending a few minutes with us.
Yeah, good to be here. Always good to be here.
I know you have a lot still to do today. You're dressed up. You're heading to the office. This is the end of my day. Right. But I'm glad that we could intersect. Let's start here. Let's start with football. It is a huge weekend. I know you're going to be in East Lansing for Michigan and Michigan State. But beyond that, 4 of the top 9 teams right now in the AP poll in the Big Ten. So fans throughout the conference feeling really good about where things stand. How would you assess the Big Ten season to this point?
I mean, Dave, one, it's good to be here and be on set. It's been an outstanding season. I mean, our teams have played well. I think it just reiterates the power of the Big Ten, the phenomenal coaches that we have, the phenomenal student athletes that we have, and the phenomenal fans that we have. And so it's been an outstanding season to see our teams play well. These next 6 weeks are going to be really, interesting, and it's been great for me to be able to get back out to campus and watch these games in person.
That's the big thing that I wanted to ask you about, because last year you just weren't able to do it. You got to a few campuses, and then, of course, the pandemic started, and it was just not a situation where you could travel and watch games in the same kind of way and visit with student athletes. And I know you've been able to do it. You were telling me you've been essentially everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, I have. I mean, really in about 2 weeks, I would have been able to watch every one of our football teams play at their home stadium. Quite naturally, that means I've seen some teams play a few times, but just to be back in the environment. I mean, I was in West Lafayette last weekend for the Wisconsin-Purdue game, and on campus and feeling the energy of the fans and the students, and was able to go and watch some basketball practice while I was there. So this is what really makes the Big Ten, is just the strength and the grit and the talent of not only our coaches, our student athletes, and the energy of the fans.
Yeah, it is so much different, right, when the fans are on campus. And I know visiting with student athletes is a huge part of it to you, too. How about the Olympic sports? I mean, one thing that's really struck me is we've kind of gone through and have been doing this show, and we've had a lot of Olympic sports student athletes and coaches on. I mean, you think about how good it's been in field hockey and volleyball. We've got some teams towards the top of the national polls in men's and women's soccer. How would you assess just kind of the strength of the league as a whole?
I mean, I check those data points on a daily basis, and to see, I mean, you look at field hockey, the way that we've had so many teams, it really is. I can't remember a year that this happens before. I was able to go to Northwestern, the Maryland field hockey game, to watch that, in person. But just to see field hockey, and like you said, volleyball again is outstanding. Soccer, and we have our cross country championships here this week. But to see all that coming together, the thing that just makes me so energized is to see our student athletes having a chance to have fun and play the sports that they love. But to see us where we are in the rankings is going to be really exciting to see how this wraps up.
You mentioned you were at Purdue and got a chance to watch basketball. And, of course, they're a team that a lot of people think could finish not just at the top of the conference, but has a legitimate chance of being a Final Four team. And I'd say there are several other Big Ten teams that fall into that. What has you most excited as a former basketball student athlete yourself about the basketball season coming up?
I mean, it is really just what you said. We have great teams. We have some iconic coaches. But to see the number of players that are back, and like I said, I was able to watch both the men and the women Purdue basketball teams practice, and there's so much energy. And I really felt it at media days, when we had basketball media days here in Indianapolis, to see our talented student athletes, behind the camera, our coaches, people energized. People are really excited, not only in our Big Ten footprint, but across the country, for basketball, both men's and women's basketball. And so I can't wait till the games start. I'll be able to go see all of our teams play on multiple occasions, and now to be able to weave that into some of my trips on campus is going to be an exciting basketball season.
You mentioned media days. I thought it was just an overwhelming success, and not just my opinion, but in talking, every time student athletes came up on the set and you say to them, hey, what do you think of what's going on here? Oh, wow, it was great. I was back in the Pacers locker room, and they got my jersey up there, and to have the men and the women combined, I thought was a great touch. And of course, football media days were very similar, where they were at the venue where the championship game is going to be, not just the conference championship game, but the national championship game, coincidentally this year. Is this the new model, in your opinion? Is this the way it should be done?
I really do believe it is, and having an opportunity to talk with our staff about what we could do better from a basketball and football media day standpoint. The idea internally was to make sure that we had it at the location on the court or on the field, but also from a basketball standpoint to make sure that we had both our women and our men's student athletes at the same time from a gender equity standpoint. And so during basketball media days, to be able to announce the hiring of the vice president of women's basketball, which we're coming to finalizing that hire. We'll be able to announce it before our women's basketball season formally kicks off in November. And then to announce the Lisa Byington Award. I know what you feel about Lisa, what I feel about Lisa, to basically touch a young student on our campus. But I think what it showed is that we need to continually be forward thinking. I'm constantly challenge our staff. Good, better, best, exceptional, legendary, and I want to make sure that we're in that exceptional and legendary status. But I think by this year, I think what you were able to see is that one, the student athletes enjoyed it. Two, the coaches enjoyed it. Our fans enjoyed it. I would love to be able to incorporate our fans in that whole media day. And it's a great growth opportunity for our student athletes because I've challenged them. A lot of them will be great college players and they'll go on to have wonderful, normal lives. Some of them will play professionally in the WNBA or in the NBA. Some of them will coach. But there may be, and I'm confident there will be, some owners in this student athlete group. And so I think the more that we can expose them to these type of experiences to get their feedback, it was really exceptional this year, but it'll even be more exceptional next year.
You mentioned being forward thinking. I know you're not ready to make any announcements at this point, but at what point might we know locations of future football championship games, locations of future Big Ten basketball tournaments?
We're in the process of working on that now, literally as we speak. We had one of the final meetings last evening before I left to go home. Was the fact to get an update on what are the potential options. Indianapolis has been an absolutely remarkable and phenomenal partner. One is logistics, to be able to ingress and egress, the hotels, the restaurants, but them as partners. They've just been phenomenal as a partner. So we understand that. That being said, we want to make sure that in our footprint that goes from Nebraska to New Jersey, that we provide people with an opportunity to really touch and feel Big Ten, not only football, but basketball up close and personal. But we want to be methodical like we always are. We want to be transparent. And as we gather this information, then address it internally before we make a decision. But we're looking from a long-term perspective, and I think what you just alluded to also, there's an opportunity not for the championship games from a men's and women's basketball standpoint or football standpoint, but from the media day. That we have a chance to be able to incorporate that into the DNA of the local fabric of the communities.
I do want to ask you about the college football playoff. You've said openly the Big Ten is in favor of expanding the college football playoff without coming to a specific number. There are going to be CFP meetings coming up next week in Dallas. Where do you think this is more globally in terms of the other conferences and where we are along this road to potential expansion?
Yeah, we have some meetings planned for the next couple of weeks in Dallas. I'm looking forward to them. We've prepared a lot. Fortunately, I've been able to talk to our key constituents, our chancellors and presidents, our athletic directors, our faculty athletic representatives, our senior women administrators, our coaches, our student athletes, some former student athletes, even parents. And I think overwhelmingly people feel that the college football playoff should be expanded. But I'm a big believer is that it has to be done at the right time, for the right reasons, and in the right manner. And so still just gathering all this information, but these meetings will be critical next week to work through all of the different issues. What's the right number? Is it 12? Is it 8? Is there another number? What's the timing of it? Where are these games to be played? Are they going to be in central locations? Are they going to be in our footprint? We need to make sure our stadiums are winterized. What about the academic calendar for our student athletes? What are health and safety issues? What is the TV arrangement? What is the relationship with the Rose Bowl and the other bowls? And so all of those things, we want to make sure we do it in a thoughtful manner. I'm confident at the appropriate time we will reach the appropriate decision. But these, Dave, as you know better than anyone, these are really important decisions. I take it very personal to make sure that we look out for our student athletes and our fans and our conference. And so this is something that I want to be very thoughtful as we walk toward deciding what to do.
So when you say you are in favor of expansion, why is 4 not the right number? So in other words, what makes you say, hey, we need more?
I personally think from an access standpoint, if you kind of look at the numbers, football has the lowest amount of access points to win a national championship. I mean, you look when you get into the basketball tournament. You have 64 plus teams to be able to win a national championship, and so all of those sports, football is a very limited number. And then if you look at even over the last couple of years of the college football playoff system, there's only been a handful of schools who've been able to have access to it. So I think just from a student athlete centric standpoint, by opening up the playoffs, it will provide student athletes with an opportunity to win a national championship, to compete for a national championship. And then also what it does from a fan standpoint, it will, I think, even engage fans even longer because, deeper into the season. And so, but again, we got to balance all of those things because we have to remember our student athletes, our students first. We need to make sure does it fit into the academic calendar from a final exam standpoint? What does it do from health and safety? All of those different issues, to be really thoughtful and ask a lot of questions is what is the why?
Yeah, I agree with you, though. And I think a big thing, I mean, as you say, student athlete access, everyone wants to come and have a chance to play for a national championship. And from the fans, I mean, this year has been so crazy in college football, and it has shown us how much fun it can be if more fan bases are engaged and if more fan bases feel like they have a chance. And that's in a 4-team scenario. So imagine if it were an 8 or a 12 or whatever it is. Any other initiatives that you're really excited about from a conference point of view that you want people to be aware of?
Yeah, I just think from a conference point of view is we're going to constantly make sure that we do everything we can to provide an environment for our student athletes. One thing I'm excited about is what we've done from a data analytics standpoint. We've been working hard internally to really launch our Big Ten data analytics department, which you all will be reading about, and that will just be able to provide a better ability for us to gather information about what our fans want, what our season ticket holders, want at our various institutions, what we can provide to do better. So that's going to be interesting, and to develop more stronger relationships with potential partners. And then what we're doing in the Equality Coalition. I mean, I know you have an opportunity to participate in that, and we have some really exciting opportunities, especially as we get toward next summer, certain field trips that I know we'll be talking about to really expand the experience, for our student athletes. And then with our alliance, I mean, that's coming together well with our Pac-12 and ACC partners as we work through it. But as we start getting a little bit deeper in the fall, quite naturally, scheduling, planning will be important, but there's so many things that we're going to work together on as we promise in the alliance, from social justice issues, from mental health and wellness issues, all those different things that we're working together on to make sure that everything that we said that we would do, that we will do, and to make sure that we provide an opportunity for our student athletes to have a more robust opportunity while they're on our campuses.
Well, it really means a lot to me that you stopped by, and I'm hoping we can make this a regular thing. I know there's a lot of moving parts, I know, in your world, but appreciate you coming by and keeping us abreast of everything that's going on. Exciting time for the Big Ten, no doubt. I appreciate you, and as I said, this is going to be a great week, a great weekend of sports in the Big Ten. And again, it's an honor to serve all of our student athletes and our fans, and to have a great partner in Big Ten Network. Well, enjoy the football in East Lansing. It's going to be a heck of a game.
Setting up a screen. He has Hayward. Dives, touchdown, Michigan State.
I can't believe we lost that game last year. It was crazy.
And that's it. 27-24 the final. Michigan State comes into Ann Arbor and upsets 13th ranked Michigan.
That game definitely made me sick to my stomach. A lot of very, very stupid mistakes, but we learned from it. And last year was what it was. And we showed what we showed. And that's not us. And we learned from it. We grew from it, and people are going to see the work we put in.
Well, both Michigan and Michigan State, frankly, benefiting from their hard work. The first top 10 matchup in this rivalry since 1964, Saturday in East Lansing. It is a rivalry the Spartans have had their way in of late, winning 9 of the last 13 matchups. Wolverines looking to buck some trends. Haven't beaten an AP top 15 team on the road since winning at Notre Dame in 2006. Anthony Herron is here as promised. He visits with us each and every Wednesday, and in your finest Halloween attire.
I mean, I'm a little disappointed, I must admit. I was anticipating maybe a full costume.
Really? Well, it's not even Halloween yet.
Well, we're days away.
So you're supposed
I mean,
I do this show
week.
5 days a week.
Halloween
You want
week,
me to have a
we are
different
here
costume every
as
day?
we build towards the holiday day.
I think it's
Saturday.
unrealistic expectation.
All right,
Yeah,
the
yeah.
weekend. I will keep my hopes up for the weekend.
All right, I'm going to be dressed up on Halloween. It happens to be the one day of the week I'm not on television. So, what stands out as we get ready for Michigan and Michigan State?
I love everything you laid out there because this is what both fan bases hope for. I suppose it simplifies things if there happens to be a season where one of these teams isn't doing well and the other team is. But when you think about the fact that both are undefeated, like you're talking about, well over 50 years
Crazy.
since a game of this magnitude with the teams both playing at this level is here. And so I believe overall the fact that Mel Tucker was able to take down Jim Harbaugh last year, and folks are kind of wondering, all right, was that a one-off? Was it a fluke? Is it just simply because Michigan wasn't on top of their game last fall? Or is this something where a trend of Michigan State puffing their chest against the team that was once referred to as their big brother? Now can this new regime sort of supplant their foot and put their line in the sand and say, you know what, we're here to stay also?
What are the biggest matchups that you're looking for in this game that you think kind of dictates how it goes?
I think Michigan State's run defense has been better this season than kind of the overall total defensive statistics would display about their season so far, but I like the way that they hit blocks up front against the rush. And I certainly love the rotation that they have at linebacker and how they find a way to sort of sift through the traffic and work their way towards the football. And of course, if that's going to be the case, then it's going to cause problems for Michigan because of the way they like to lead offensively with the ground attack. So I think that Spartan defensive front seven needing to be able to at least, not completely shut down, but just stymie, make life difficult for Michigan to run the football, force them behind the chains a few times. That matchup will be so key because, of course, on the flip side, that's a bit more of the strength on strength, as it were, for Michigan's front seven and everything that Michigan State throws at you offensively. But I'm really eager to see what Michigan State's front seven can do against that Michigan rushing attack.
To what extent do you think home field plays into this? I mean, it figures to be a raucous atmosphere.
Yeah, man, I think it's huge. I remember I played in a game in East Lansing one year where, this is obviously many moons ago, I'm in Iowa, go out to the opening coin toss and, go out there and it was the honorary captain was Bubba Smith. And, I didn't even recognize it. We're just out there. I'm strutting out there with the rest of the Hawkeyes, got my mean face on. And I look around and I just see this mammoth hand reaching out over to me. Oh, hey, what's up, Hightower? And there's Bubba Smith just standing there. And then just the atmosphere of the stadium itself just cascading. It's one of the more underrated atmospheres in the Big Ten is Spartan Stadium, especially when the team is balling the way that the Michigan State Spartans have been balling this year. So I think it is going to be beyond raucous. It is going to be loud. There's I don't know if it's tin or whatever metallic elements in the stadium just allow the noise and the volume to reverberate in the way that it does. But that stadium is loud, man, when the crowd gets into it.
We should do a metallic analysis of the.
We should.
Yeah.
So whatever materials.
Some of you and I can
there.
do in the offseason together. A little,
just nerd out on how they
field
designed
trip
Spartan
to
Stadium.
East Lansing. What about Ohio State, Penn State? Does it just feel like to you? And James Franklin came out yesterday and said Sean Clifford is 100%. And that he's way ahead of where he was last week.
Of course.
Yeah, I mean, again.
He was fine last week, right?
Well,
Yeah,
right.
no
I mean,
problem.
okay. But does it just come down to them needing him to be as good as he can possibly be to even have a shot at this thing? I mean, it doesn't feel to me on the outside as if this figures to be a particularly close game. I don't know if you agree.
It seems to come down to that. What version of Sean Clifford do they get? Do they get some version that's even close to full strength? And to the point of what we saw on the field last week, it certainly didn't look like that. We didn't see a Sean Clifford running around extending plays to the effectiveness he normally does. We certainly didn't see Sean Clifford throwing the football in the manner that he normally does. And assuming the health of Jahan Dotson and Parker Washington, they need to find ways to get the ball into the hands of their weaponry, what they have at their disposal. And in the not too distant past, we saw how Penn State was able to supplement their rushing attack with a variety of quarterbacks. I mean, of course, Sean Clifford is more than mobile enough to do that, especially if he's not healthy enough, though. I don't mind the idea of Taquan Roberson getting onto the field and adding an additional rushing element. I sort of take it to the mind of what we see Jeff Brom do with Purdue. And, of course, Penn State expects to run the football at a higher level than they have this season, but they're just not. And Jeff Brom, his Purdue Boilermakers have never run the football at the level he'd like to, so he finds ways and rotates quarterbacks in and out to supplement things. That was Will Levis's role in the not too distant past. So maybe you use Roberson and get him a few additional reps and allow him to do that. And certainly, man, we saw what Jahan Dotson did to this Ohio State secondary last season. What he has the potential to do to any secondary. Feed him the ball. Throw it up to him. If he is triple covered, I think give him some opportunities for chunk plays. Maybe you at least pick up a flag.
That was what was so curious, I thought, on Saturday, is it didn't feel like they really took advantage of him against the Illinois pass defense that has struggled mightily this year. And then Roberson, I mean, when you can't run the ball, why not put in some read option with a mobile quarterback? And he's certainly shown that. As you said, Sean Clifford is a mobile quarterback as well, but that didn't really seem to be the game plan given how banged up he is. Man, it's a tough task for them. I mean, Ohio State, 22 straight conference home wins. A win here would give them the longest streak in Big Ten history. I do want to ask you about Iowa and Wisconsin. I feel like it's being overshadowed somewhat because of those games in the East, and probably mostly because of Michigan State, to a lesser extent because of the other one. But this is a massive game in the Big Ten West race, Anthony. What do you think here?
Ginormous, if you don't mind me using a pretend word. I mean, I think that because
you use whatever word you want to use.
Especially when I'm wearing this bow tie.
As long as it's one the FCC approves of,
cool.
You go nuts.
All right, as long as we're in agreement. Because I think that for Iowa coming off of a bye week, I'm really curious how their offense, and yes, it's just 1 week away, but we saw Minnesota look like a really different team after a bye week. Northwestern had their greatest performance after a bye, as did Purdue. Can Iowa be that at this point? Because in a lot of elements, there's a lot of ways that Wisconsin and Iowa mirror each other for what they want to do, not necessarily for what they are this season. And you would anticipate that Wisconsin's offensive approach at this point sort of plays into Iowa's hands because, frankly, they're not going to be able to defeat you with the pass, and they seemingly have just accepted that. I think from Iowa's perspective, though, against a Badgers defense that's been stout all year, and we've talked about now their ability to begin finally to take the football away that they showcased. For Iowa, you got to be able to throw the ball. Spencer Petras has to be more consistent with his accuracy. You're hoping that them getting healthy up front and continuing to find a variety of ways with personnel groupings to get young receivers involved, to get Tyler Goodson the football, both from the backfield and out in space. I'm really curious to see what progress Iowa's passing attack and their offense on the whole has made. And if that's the case, they're certainly going to have a stout test against this Badgers defense out the gate.
I worry about them protecting. I mean, I think the thing that's really stood out to me about Wisconsin is the way that they pressure you here in these last few weeks.
And the sack numbers don't indicate it.
Not always.
But they have a lot of great individual pass rushers.
I think it's gotten dramatically better here in the last few weeks. But I mean, Leo Chanel's been like unblockable here in recent games. And so a huge part of, can you throw the ball? Because they're virtually impossible to run it against, particularly when you look at the way that Iowa runs the ball, right? That just doesn't feel like a great equation for success. I think it's easy to look at this game, though, Anthony, not to cut you off and say, how's either team going to move the ball?
Well, I don't see Iowa sort of acquiescing the run game like I think perhaps Purdue does or Penn State maybe even should to some extent. Iowa's still going to make their attempts to rush it because they want at least the balance of what the defense has to honor. Even if there's not big success, you just keep Tyler Goodson and his talent involved in your offensive package because he might be your most capable playmaker of all the skill position guys that are available. But in the end, yes, you can't anticipate that huge chunk plays will consistently happen, especially just the ability to move the chains consistently for Iowa's rushing attack. But overall, it does enough to set up play action. It does enough to free up your tight ends, multiple tight ends, assuming that Luke Lachey may be healthy for this game also. So it can allow some additional comfort for Spencer Petras. But yes, to have your tight ends involved in protection, multiple running backs involved in protection, because whether it's Sanborn or Chanel or Herbig, they have a variety of guys who can really penetrate into the backfield without even needing to blitz. They just got great individual pass rushers, and then Jim Leonard mixes the blitz in also.
I agree with you from Iowa's point of view, though, on the bye. I mean, it really feels like there's been some very obvious frustration with the offense here and the way that it performed last time out, and now you got a week to kind of figure it out. I mean, you have an incredibly stiff test going up against Wisconsin, but your point is well taken. I mean, we have really seen Big Ten teams take advantage of the bye. I mean, Illinois was an unbelievable example of it last week, right? You mentioned Northwestern. There have been a bunch of teams where they have been dramatically better coming out of that bye week. And, there's a reason Kirk Ferentz has won as many games as he has. You don't, by mistake, end up in the top five all time in wins in the Big Ten. You got to feel like they'll figure out some way to to scheme and move the ball here.
I believe we'll see Iowa's best foot that comes forward here. It's still going to be, obviously, because it's Wisconsin's defense, a very, very tough task that they have ahead of them. But with that in mind, finding those opportunities for shot plays, and as much as anything, just Spencer Petras being able to step back, hone back in on mechanics, hone back in on what began to make him a more accurate passer. If he gets consistent with those things, he spent the whole offseason working on mechanics. What can happen during the regular season, Dave, is because you're game planning week in and week out, you're playing against cards week in and week out, you don't necessarily get those opportunities like you can during a bye week to hone back in on just your particular skills at your position. Be reminded of how you have success snap in and snap out. And at a quarterback, your footwork, your arm action, some of those things, your decision-making, the way you scan the field, all those things you have more of an opportunity to do over a bye week without necessarily worrying about the game plan and what the opponent's doing as much. And maybe that is where Iowa can get Spencer Petras even better than where he was for the initial chunk of the season.
And get the ball to playmakers. Hey, you mentioned Goodson. I mean, if you can figure out a way to get him in space, even if it's not handing the ball to him, he is really something. I love Keegan Johnson. I've been excited about him since we saw him in camp. So there's some guys there that if you can put him in the right spot, it's just easier said than done against Wisconsin's defense.
And Graham Mertz, just don't turn it over. Don't turn it over.
Yeah, right. Right. No, I mean, look, the competitive advantage for Iowa in this game, and clearly up until last week with Wisconsin has been that Wisconsin can't get out of their own way in terms of turnovers, and they don't force any mistakes from the opponent. But that narrative shifted a little bit with what they did to Purdue.
That old line, man, multiple backs.
Yeah, no doubt. Back on Big Ten today, the Impact 5. Each and every week, we count them down from 5 to 1, Letterman style.
I mean, if you must. You know what? I have no issues with Dave Letterman.
Yeah, I'm just going to keep insisting on this Letterman style. See, at a certain point, if you just persist
beat
enough.
Me over the head with it over and over again. You know what? It's Letterman style.
Okay, good. I'm glad we've agreed on that. So then I'll move on next week. Where are you starting with number 5?
Well, the team that's at number 5 for me enters the list for the first time this season amongst the top 5. Man, because
so they're number 5 with a bullet.
Well, sure.
Yeah.
We'll go with that.
Casey Kasem. Yeah.
Did he invent that? Was he the first one to say that?
I don't know.
I mean, we'll credit Casey Kasem with it. I'm going to credit the Minnesota Golden Gophers as number 5 on my Impact 5 because I was referencing earlier the way that they came out of their bye week. And you look at just a few moments on their schedule this season. They've been very up and down. And so many coaches talk consistency and how they want their teams to grow. And I think overall, where you think back to like shutting down Colorado on the road, but then losing to Bowling Green, but then now for consecutive weeks, I believe there's not a team in the West Division as complete as the Minnesota Golden Gophers. They can certainly run it regardless of who's in the backfield. Having their top 2 backs out, no problem. You got the biggest offensive line in America. But Tanner Morgan looks like the old Tanner Morgan again now that he's got health at wide receiver. And you got playmakers on the outside. When they need them, guys like Chris Altman-Bale and Dalen Wright and Daniel Jackson, they're available. They just don't use them if they don't have to because the rushing attack is so magnificent. And then defensively, man, Joe Rossi has his guys balling out. And so when you add the defense, the pass rush that's emerged with the competency of their offense, I think Minnesota is as big a threat as anyone in that division.
Top 10 in the nation in scoring defense. You think about where they were.
Top 5 in rushing defense, man.
Yeah, no, I know. They're really hard to run it against, and that's going to be a challenge for their opponent this week. We'll get into that with Northwestern, who wants to try to run the ball. But you think about where they were last year, Anthony, defensively, and what an incredible job they have done to getting it back there. And then to have 5 different guys who've gone over 100 yards rushing at this point in the season. Again, it's pretty
rarely
remarkable.
Seen anything.
So I'm
like
with you.
It.
I'm thinking the bullet may have been the Billboard Top 100, right? I think that's maybe where that
makes
sense.
That
comes
that
from.
Makes
I
sense.
don't want to give credit to Casey, but although he did a bang up job
I don't have any
with
problem
America's
with
Top
Casey
40.
I just didn't necessarily think it was him.
We can look that up after the show. I feel like
we've got a lot of research.
No, I know. I've taken us down some crazy roads. What about number 4? Where are you going there?
Well, there's a team who was frequently at the number 1 spot, at least at the number 2 spot for much of the times we've been doing the Impact 5. Now it's the Iowa Hawkeyes at number 4. And as I see them right now coming out of the bye, there's an opportunity here. And Kirk Ferentz has even sort of referenced the season in 2 different parts. He said that the first 7-game portion of the schedule was 1 season, and now these last 5 games are a 2nd season for the Iowa Hawkeyes. And with these 5 games remaining, it's about offense. Now, you know, Riley Moss isn't going to be back this week. You hope the defense gets healthy. But overall, there's confidence the defense will perform at a high level. But if they're not taking it away, Iowa's offense, just like I was talking about back when they were at number 2 in the country and the concerns that were still there at that point. We still have those, but coming out of the bye, we see it year in and year out, Dave. Iowa's playing better football at the end of the season than they were at the start. Specifically, the offensive execution needs to continue to improve. If it does, they may be a team that ascends back beyond this number 4 spot.
Again, we talked about it a lot in the last segment, but this stretch of schedule is going to be very telling for them. I mean, at Wisconsin this week, they have a game against Northwestern, and then they play Minnesota the following week. So you talk about the teams that you are fighting in Wisconsin and Minnesota there atop the West. We're going to see how they match up here in the next few weeks. Where are you going to see 2 West teams to start? You heading, I assume, to the East next, given the strength at the top of that division.
That's a fair assumption. That's a fair assumption. And I've been having difficulties sort of, dividing my attention between the 2 Michigan schools for really the bulk of the season at this point. I have Michigan State at number 3 on my list. And for the moment, the reason why is even despite their excellence, both passing the ball and running the ball, and my thought that the defense is even better than folks perhaps give them credit for. And for the moment, I think the grit that Michigan State has had to show in a number of games this year where they've been tested both on the road and at home, that's the type of thing that aids them on the stage that they'll be on this weekend and facing the Michigan Wolverines. It's hard to overstate how wonderful what it is that's happened in East Lansing has been for Mel Tucker, for that program in just the second season, and everything still remains out in front of them as they're undefeated. So I wonder how, Mel Tucker says he doesn't like putting a cap on anyone's goals. He doesn't like talking about the ceiling of his ball club. So they win this game. This would be the one where I think everyone around the country ends up saying, well, you know what, maybe Michigan State isn't just a cute story. Maybe this is legitimately a second time the Spartans can make the college football playoff.
So how is it that you have them, like, what is it about them is maybe the better way to phrase it, that puts them behind, in some order, Michigan and Ohio State? Why is Michigan State 3 and not 2 or 1?
I think that the competitive depth at key positions is one where, I think the tailback even behind Kenneth Walker is talented, but the offensive line, when they've been tested a bit or gotten banged up, don't necessarily see the competitive depth at that spot. And overall, just the excellence at that position. There are other offensive lines that perform at a higher level up front than Michigan State's does. They're not necessarily a dominant group. Love the efficiency of quarterback Peyton Thorne, and that's going to have to be, I think, a part of how he operates, using not only the passing ability, but the mobility as well. So he's a playmaking QB. Maybe you even get a little bit more out of Peyton Thorne. They play it safe with him at times and just find a few moments for shot plays because they like that balance on offense. And defensively, it's good personnel that plays in position, but not a hellacious pass rush. Some of it is schemed into us. I think personnel-wise, they're not quite on par with the 2 teams ahead of them.
Okay, so who's the team immediately ahead of them?
Immediately ahead of them is the Wolverines. I think that Michigan, even though schematically, I don't think they do quite as much to threaten every blade of grass on the field as what Michigan State does, but they don't necessarily need to at all times because of their offensive line, because of how dominant they've been up front. And as you and I have been talking about for a few weeks now, they finally got to the point where they began to trust Cade McNamara to attack defenses with the pass, even occasionally on first down. Like, they've thrown a few first down passes lately. I know it's not always in vogue there in Ann Arbor, but they're doing that, and it allows some of that additional weaponry to force defenses to honor them in a way that they don't always have to when you're just sort of playing within that one little sandbox of the Michigan ground attack. But man, can they run it? And so, between Hassan Haskins, Blake Corum, they are both, and especially Haskins, where he still used to look like a linebacker running the ball, an athletic linebacker, but a linebacker. Now he looks like a real tailback between the jump cuts, the burst through the hole, some of the receiving ability that they'll even use on occasion too. Just think overall, personnel-wise, that talent that's there, I see development in that talent also. It's not just the 7-0 end of it, but it just looks like the best Michigan team, at least since, whatever that revenge tour team was, what was it, like 2018 with Chase Winovich and all the other guys. Yeah. They just seem to have the ability to become more complete, and they're actually improving throughout the year.
So I'm with you on all this. I still worry about the pass game. Like, I think they made a concerted effort to throw it more against Northwestern, and really they had 3 straight weeks, right, where they had more passing yards than rushing yards. They averaged basically 5 yards per pass attempt against Northwestern. I do think Northwestern's defense is better than it's not a very high bar. It's certainly better than it was at the beginning of the year. I think these last 2 weeks they've clearly done something different. They just got worn out around the field too long in the game against Michigan.
When you can run it like they do.
5 yards per pass attempt?
Yeah, you only need so much when you can run it like they do.
Well, but yes and no. Don't you think you're going to come up against elite defenses that can force you to throw the ball? And
yes, the complementary football in it, they're not going to throw it like Ohio State. They can't and they won't. But that being said, their pass game has improved. I don't think any reason should be there to assume it won't continue to improve down the stretch here with still over a month to go in the season.
And they don't make mistakes in the pass game, and the QB
Right.
doesn't get sacked. I mean, they don't do things to kind of shoot themselves in the foot. Okay, so that means number one's Ohio State.
Yeah, without a doubt. And to see the way they've begun to perform here and opponent after opponent just sort of lying in their wake afterwards. This is the team we thought they could be this year. I think a lot of us sort of, looked beyond the inexperience that was there at key spots. But now, and certainly the way the defense has begun to perform now makes them look like not just a team that can outscore anyone in the country, but perhaps a juggernaut, perhaps one of the great Buckeye teams that we've seen in the history of this program, because they now have the potential to take the ball away, put it in the end zone, sack the quarterback. That's what you should be able to do with the personnel that's there and this slight adjustment that Ryan Day has made. And I think this is the best coaching job that Ryan Day has done. Obviously, just a few seasons as the head man, but he has been spectacular in the way he's led Buckeye football.
I agree with you, because I think the one thing that we were talking about early in the year was, hey, this is the first time he's really faced adversity.
Yep.
As a head coach.
Yep.
I mean, it was the first crisis.
Mm-hmm. And you never know how
Yeah.
a coach will respond, how players will respond, just how a program can sort of persevere through it. And they have. They've been tested, and they have not been left wanting. They have responded to every test in front of them so far, not just on the field, but tested off the field, in the meeting rooms, the boardrooms, and everything else. And they've been able to grow from that adversity.
I do want to see how they do against better teams. They've not played great opposition here.
And I'm not
in the last
discounting,
month.
I'm not predicting an upset by Penn State, but I think there's going to be a ticked off Penn State team on the field this week. The best secondary probably that Ohio State has faced so far this season.
Right.
And I think it's going to be a nice test to see where the Buckeyes are at.
All right, so that is the top 5 for now.